3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Exiles,
We are Exiles.
our brand new podcast, what it means to be a believer in a culture that's against the gospel. My name is Stefan Waymeyer. I am the missions pastor at the Ridge Church, here with Pastor Matt, lead pastor of the Ridge Church of Sullivan. Podcast is dedicated to preaching to believers in this dysfunctional society. We want to love people well, especially those who are down and out, because we have been down and out and we've needed his love well.
We never want to dwell in the past, but we also need to visit our scars sometimes and say, I can imagine where I'd be without the grace of God.
And the world needs the exiles. Our number one focus is reaching the reachable and teaching the teachable.
It's the heart of the gospel.
Welcome to Exiles, our brand new podcast. We are essentially talking about what it means to be a believer in a culture that's against the gospel. My name is Stefan Waymeyer. I am the missions pastor at the Ridge Church, here with Pastor Matt, boss man, lead pastor of the Ridge Church of Sullivan. Podcast essentially, right, Pastor Matt, is dedicated to preaching to believers in this dysfunctional society that we live in. So thanks for being here.
We are Exiles.
Exiles.
Is this going to be like the pilot episode of a show, though?
Yes, but it'll be good. Not like most pilot episodes.
Because most pilot episodes are terrible.
Yeah. This will be better than that.
Never judge by the pilot.
So Pastor Matt, we went back and forth for a while about the title of the podcast.
Yes.
What we're going to call it, where we're going to land on it. We had a few names we threw out.
What was the one we really liked?
It doesn't matter. We had one for the audience. We had one that someone else had, and so
we
had to change.
We decided that was it.
Yeah, I almost got tattooed. I was ready.
Yeah.
I was locked in.
And then,
Yeah, but we threw out some ideas with ChatGPT and some other resources. Why, whenever we said the word exile, that was one word that really stuck out to you?
It did, yeah.
Why? Why was that?
Well, it wasn't just me, but I think we both agreed that it was, yeah. I just think it illustrates, I think the word itself illustrates well who we are as believers. If you're seeking to live well as a Christian, there are various, like I said, I think this past Sunday, there's religianity and then there's Christianity. And I think if you're, admittedly, religianity is not a word. I made that up, but you get the idea.
I was curious.
yeah, Google it. It's not a word. The word is religiosity is the right word. But if you're a true follower of Christ in the most genuine sense, born again and trying to follow the Spirit, trying to be in God's Word, my experience, I've been a Christian for 26 years, and for the majority of that time, I've been in full-time ministry for 21 years. And it's you find yourself in this sort of odd space, I believe, where, as Jesus said, we're in the world but not of the world. But we all, we don't live in a commune. We're not living in isolation. We're also still functioning in society. Mm-hmm. And you want to love people well, but then there are things you can't affirm. And I don't know. I've always, I have found myself oftentimes in this very strange middle ground where, if you love sinners well and lost people and you go after them, a lot of times you get attacked by some of the religious community, and then vice versa, because of certain things that we believe in that are articulated in Scripture, then that goes against the grain of society. And so I just feel like when we kind of hit that, that title for the podcast, I thought, man, that really well articulates who we are in this world. If we're living well, Jesus was full of grace and truth. And so because of grace, you get criticized. Because of truth, you get criticized.
Sure.
And so, I think it's a great descriptive word.
Yeah. And you can even look at, you brought up the grace and truth. I think about obviously immediately John chapter 4 and this idea when he's talking to the Samaritan woman, and he's in this idea, hey, one day my people will come worship me in spirit and in truth, or in grace and in truth as well. And this idea of like you're saying, whenever you love sinners well, you love the lost well, people then look at you, even as a church, like for our church, even look at you as in, well, why would you have, those people in your building?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you affirming sin? Why do you allow these people that are broken, that are destitute, that have nowhere to go, that, live this certain past or this certain present? Why do you allow them into your church building?
Right.
And one thing you say all the time from the stage is, where else would you want this person to be at?
Right.
One of the examples you use a ton of times in the past is like, if someone's drunk on a Saturday, we want you here on Sunday.
Right.
And this response is, well, why? That's not okay. Well, where else do we want the lost to be?
Right.
And it's funny because with the Samaritan woman in John 4, you see this same kind of idea where they cross to Samaria, which is already like a taboo thing in that time. It's already like a taboo idea. You usually go all the way around as to not pass through Samaria, this land of mixed breeds. But Christ said, no, we're going to go right through it for this divine appointment that he has with this woman. And then while he's talking with her, the disciples then show up. And they're like, why are you talking to a woman? And
Right.
one, she's Samaritan, and two, it's a woman alone. So he's breaking these cultural barriers, these cultural norms that religion has set up. And they get offended almost by his desire to be around these people. And you see it all the time, the Pharisees and the Sadducees coming at Jesus for hanging out with the drunkards or the tax collectors, the prostitutes.
And accused him of it.
Sure.
Accused Christ of being a drunk and a glutton.
Yeah.
Because he spent time with them, and even by his own admission, and in contrast to John the Baptist, John would fast and abstain from certain things, and Jesus said of himself that the Son of Man came eating and drinking, and you call him a glutton and a drunk, but yeah, it's that balance, and you do see that often. So obviously John 4, but the woman taken in adultery. It's not like Jesus he didn't excuse her sin and say, well, you have no right to call adultery sin. Who are you? It wasn't that he the lawgiver had every right,
Sure.
to cast the first stone. That was kind of that's the essence of the story. Let he who's without sin throw the first stone. Well, he was the only one qualified and worthy to cast the first stone. And yet he didn't, and so it's not pacifying bad behavior and toxic lifestyles. But we're trying to lead people to the essence of what life is, and life is found in Christ, and it's His grace. And so two
things with that, real quick. In this idea, like throwing stones, let me ask you like this diagnostic question a little bit. Why do you think that? I want to be careful. I want to be gracious to hyper religious people a little bit, but why do you think that people are so quick to throw stones at other people in the church when they look at either other churches or lost people? Why do you think like our natural desire is to pick up a stone and throw it at the harlot or the drunkard or the drug addict? Like why do you think that is?
I think that's a multi-layered answer. I don't think there's one particular reason. I've been thinking a lot lately. And I've mentioned it a few times recently, but the going all the way back to the Garden of Eden, the solicitation from the enemy, the way Satan tempted Eve was with the knowledge of good and evil. You will be as gods, knowing good and evil, which is kind of the essence of a critical judgmental spirit, is that we have taken it upon ourselves to be the judges. Well, we were just talking about this morning in Romans 14. Where Paul said, who are you to judge another man's servant? Speaking about the servants of God. Like if that person is God's servant, then who are you as a fellow servant to make yourself the judge of that person? I'm going to answer to God. Other fellow believers outside of my purview, obviously there are practical applications of leadership within our own culture or rather our own context. But but just I don't know. I think that's part of it. I think part of our nature is we can feed from one of two trees. We can eat from the tree of life, which is Christ, the giver of life, or we can eat from this sort of critical, judgmental, putting ourselves on the throne. And so I think that's the core of it. I would also say that I think it's often a smokescreen. In my experience, the most critical and judgmental people that I've personally known through the years, and I've known plenty, and I've been very judgmental and critical at different times. But many times it's to deflect attention from your own.
Their own misgivings.
Yeah. Everybody has chinks in their armor. Everybody
Mhm.
has weaknesses. And so rather than owning your own weakness and being transparent and being understanding because you recognize your own
Mhm.
weakness, you become sort of, again, critical as a facade, because if I'm criticizing you, then suddenly, again, I'm putting myself in this prosecuting attorney
Sure.
position.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen it many times, like you said a little bit, in there of like rooted in insecurity,
Mhm.
like the smoke screen we throw up. So that way, if I can point all the attention to your deficiencies, or rather what I think could be deficiencies, sometimes they're not even like blatant. Like, as we know, like you're saying, like the Bible is clear about parts of leadership that we have to be. Like, let's take a pastor or an elder, right? The Bible is clear. Paul is clear and lays out some expectations. So we're
Right.
not talking about these biblical expectations. We're talking about there are times that we will throw stones even at other pastors.
Right.
You brought up this last Sunday, like even this whole situation with Charlie Kirk and different pastors either bringing up his assassination or not. And then we then become the arbiters of truth saying, if your pastor did not say this, did not bring up his death, then he's a false prophet and you need to run from him.
Mm-hmm.
Or then if he did bring it up, then now he's good.
Now suddenly he's got everyone's stamp of approval.
Yeah, and now we've taken the standard of preach the gospel, unadulterated and unashamed. That's the standard of a Bible believing church. This is what we preach the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
So now we've taken that and said, well, actually, if you don't say this, now I'm going to say you're unqualified.
Right.
Judging the servant of somebody else, judging God's servant by a standard that I am now making up in this cultural narrative. Not saying it's not important, and we brought it up in our church.
Right.
Not saying it's not important to bring up, but this idea that if you don't bring it up, now you're lacking the Holy Spirit or lacking biblical authority or.
And that's such a good example because, obviously because it's on everyone's mind. And, from a pastor's perspective, I can't understand from my own position perspective why a pastor wouldn't feel the need to talk about Charlie Kirk.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, and as you pointed out, I did, which is kind of out of character for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a front page headlines kind of preacher. I generally teach and preach expositionally. I'm usually in a series, a lot of times going through a book. And I just don't think we should let society dictate what we're feeding the flock, as elders and pastors. But we have to be careful with that because, again, I felt and everybody on our staff and pastoral team know this, but I felt very strong in my spirit that God wanted me to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
So much I really, at that point, didn't care what the fallout was because, I just felt that deeply convicted about it. But we have to be cautious that we don't start, as you just said, creating these new standards of, I don't want to name the guy's name just because I don't think he needs any more publicity than he already gets from the things that he says. But one pastor that's all over social media, he's creating a directory now of churches where they mention Charlie Kirk so that you can use that as a litmus of whether that church
Not
is
the
a
gospel.
good. Yeah, it's like time out, dude. Like there are so many things, and again, going back to what Paul said in Romans, it's not my job to judge what another pastor preaches and teaches at his own local church. Now, I will side with Paul. If any man preaches another gospel, that needs to be identified. That needs to be called out because there's only one gospel. And so the gospel is the dividing line between truth and error. And then, of course, again, I'm teaching on Wednesday night that there are first issues, second issues, tertiary issues. But the gospel is the fundamental of all fundamental truths in the scripture. And so, man, when we start getting away from that, dude, and like we start creating, in this case, well, that pastor didn't mention Charlie Kirk, I'd walk out of that church and never turn back. Time out, man. You don't know what he's dealing with. You don't know the context that he's serving in. You don't know the people that God has called him to shepherd. And pastoring, I can tell you, you have to be wise and not cowardice, but also knowing your community. And so it's just I hate it because the last thing Bible believing, gospel preaching churches need is another reason to divide and separate, and another reason to cause contention of people toward, again, I'm thinking of good men. I can think of one man in particular that I respect highly as a Bible teacher that chose not to. That's okay. You know? So
And
it's
I think
just
part of, just the idea of throwing stones, part of the idea, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but just this mentality of, hey, we are exiles. We're sojourners. We are in this world, not of this world. That does not mean that we don't have a say or a vote or an opinion about politics or about big things going on in social media or whatever the tension is that's going on in our current situation. But the gospel is our foundation.
right.
And I think that even this idea of sojourners, I mean, what is I'm going to read 1 Peter 2:11 says, "Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your soul." Like, that's our focus.
Right.
Our focus is how can we enable the saints to remain firm in their convictions, what the word says, against sin, and bring people into God's grace. That's our focus. Now, there are times when other things come up or whatever, but our standard of judgment should be there, not in these other superficial things, because whether it's towards another pastor or another church,
Right.
and then many times it's towards other Christians. Like you brought up the word unity earlier. Like how many people do we know that have broken unity even in their families because they believe these secondary or tertiary things that are different,
Right.
and we're so fast to throw stones against them? Or so how is it? So almost like shifting gears a little bit from just theology and churches. How has that been for you? Like, so I know you have an interesting past, different than mine a little bit. Well, a lot of it, I guess, when it comes to the church world. When it comes to the idea of exiles and being a sojourner, so you have a really cool story. I know you've shared it a lot, so you don't got to give the whole thing, but how has that impacted you, this idea of being, so now we're like almost removing the lost people in the conversation and just focusing on your story. You're in the church, you're a pastor, but I would say like you're hilarious to me because I would think that there are some more progressive or liberal Christians that would say that you're way too conservative. And there's probably some conservative Christians that say you're way too liberal.
Yeah.
So how has that been for you, kind of like walking that tension a little bit of saying, here's where I stand on the gospel, but you're not going to get me in these pigeonholes on these other ideas. How has that been for you walking that? If you could just give a little bit of context to that. And
Well, and I personally refuse to let people pigeonhole me into, we're so quick to compartmentalize. I don't know if it's just how our brains are structured, but we always feel like we have to put somebody Calvinist or Arminian. We you know what I'm saying? Like, are you pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib? Are you, it's like we're always looking for ways to put people in compartments, even with theology. And so sort of taking what we've been discussing in this conversation and segueing that into an answer. On this point, okay, let's say, for example, that let's just create an invisible pastor in our mind, and this guy missed the mark, man. He should have said something. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's say we could dogmatically take this position. That guy should have said something about Charlie Kirk this past Sunday. Okay, well maybe he did. Maybe he screwed up. Maybe he missed an opportunity that he should have taken. Maybe he didn't follow the leadership of the Spirit of God. He still needs grace, man. Like, pastors are not impeccable. The same as you talked about the qualifications of a bishop. The interesting thing about the qualifications of a bishop that Paul laid out for Timothy is that everything he said that a pastor should be is true of every Christian. It's just that if a pastor is failing in those areas, that might, again, all of this is very case in point, specific, but there are things that to be a leader, you probably need to have your house in order. Obviously, if you have problems with relationships, it'd be hard to teach other people how to have solid relationships. So, but again, all those things are true. Those qualifications are not relegated to the pastoral ministry. And so failing, and this is how I'm kind of answering your question in my experience. My experience is in the more legalistic culture. even more so than yourself. And what I found that was so devastating, and I'm not talking about gross open immorality or anything, just heinous of that nature, but how quickly we write people off. Everybody has a bad day. Everybody has a bad season.
Yeah.
Everybody goes through, and this goes for leadership to people sitting in the pews on Sunday. We all go through seasons of struggle, and we have to give each other grace. If Paul said, if a brother's overtaken in a fault, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of meekness, considering yourself, unless you also be tempted. So it's very dangerous when you put yourself in the judgment seat, because you're ultimately setting yourself up for failure. And this is a mantra that I repeat often, is that the most critical people are the most criticized people. I started noticing that. It was like, okay, well, you give no grace. Why do you expect grace? You're so harsh and so bitter and so critical and cynical. Don't be shocked when you get that in return.
Yeah, if you come at me in a certain kind of energy, don't be upset when I respond in that same kind of energy.
Yeah.
Not me, but just in general. Like,
right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the odd response. When you do bite back, you can't say that. It's like, well, time out. You just said 15 things, and I've experienced this firsthand. People.
Well, one, you're a pastor, so you're not allowed to have feelings and emotions.
I had a guy one time. This is not that long ago, but I don't mind telling the story because I'm not naming names. But I had a couple people stirring up some trouble in the church with me over actually something I didn't mention. They thought I should have mentioned in current events, and I won't name the specific current event because that's a whole rabbit hole in and of itself. But I didn't mention a certain thing. Actually, I did, but I didn't accentuate it as much as they thought I should have. They thought I should have spent more time on it, which also, by the way, I didn't even know they thought that for like 6 to 8 months, and they were all talking among themselves. Behind my back, behind closed doors, and then decided to kind of...
Which, just by the way, for all the listeners, you have an issue with your pastor, you just have a conversation.
Talk to him.
Super easy.
Talk to him.
You can stop all the reviling, all the division, all the dissension. This is like a side note, housekeeping note. That's a great way.
Yeah.
Someone says something you don't like, hey, can I schedule a meeting? Or in the lobby, whatever.
Right.
Let's have this conversation, and not breeding discord in the church. But keep going. Yeah.
Right.
Just
So by the time it was brought to my attention, they had already created this whole little group of dissension and contention toward me. And so I began dealing with the families, started having conversations with the families individually, as much as I could. By that point, some people are so stirred up they don't want to even talk to you. You've just become, they've villainized you in their minds. And they'll use, well, he's unapproachable, I can't talk to him. Again, anybody says that about me, you know me very well. I'm not unapproachable. I don't hate questions. I actually like questions. I enjoy when people seek clarity. I had somebody just this week seek clarity with me on something. And I very much, with a sincere heart, express my gratitude. Man, thank you. I really genuinely appreciate you asking me directly. And so in that case, by the time I realized it was that they had an issue with it, it had already become a problem within the church. And a lot of people knew about it before I did. And so I made a comment one Sunday from the pulpit. I said something about, people don't like it when you challenge their echo chamber. And that was the essence of what had happened, because fundamentally we disagreed on how that situation should have been approached. And so I just made that kind of broad stroke comment. I said, people like to live in their echo chamber. They don't like it when you challenge their narrative. And the guy came to me, one of the kind of the main guy in the middle of the whole mess, came to me and, we're leaving the church, and okay, yeah, I assumed you were, type of thing. By the time that conversation happened,
surprised actually.
Yeah, no, I was not at all shocked. And by the time that conversation happened, I was like, I expected that. And, he goes, well, you just, you were gaslighting us. And I paused and I said, do you know the definition of gaslighting? Literally, I was baffled, because that was exactly what they'd been doing to me, was gaslighting me and acting like I was crazy. For even now as a pastor, you've made this such a mess. I have to say something.
Sure.
I didn't call names. I didn't specifically call out even the issue. I just said, man, some people just don't like it when you challenge their narrative, and we like to sort of live in our own echo chamber, and we surround ourselves with people who say the same things and just parrot back to us what we're saying. And that was what he took offense to and said I was gaslighting. I said, dude, you created these problems. All I did was identify it. And I don't apologize for identifying it. In fact, I probably, from a biblical perspective, the Bible says we're supposed to mark those who are causing division contrary to the doctrines which you've learned. And so anyway, without going further into the actual issue itself, but it had to do with eschatology and end times and things like that. And we just have different views on that, and it's fine. That's one of those tertiary issues. But it's just we have to have conversations. And I think that's where we've lost the art of being able to have a disagreement without becoming disagreeable and contentious toward each other. And we get big in our feelings, and we it's just we have to be better than that.
Yeah, I think the art of seeking to understand. So I preached last Wednesday and used this idea of, hey, whenever there's a gap of information, this is from another pastor, and this is like his analogy is, when there's a gap of information, do you choose to believe the best or assume the worst? And the frustrating part, I think, about just believers in general, but in the church, we do not do a good job at that. When we have, I don't understand why this pastor did not bring up Charlie Kirk. Well, I don't understand why this pastor did bring up Charlie Kirk. Instead of saying, I'm going to seek to understand, because love bears all things, right? So this is like, in the idea of the body of Christ, is this idea that we are walking, in the body of Christ is not just our local body, our four walls, but all the saints, right? Like the believers at large, the Big C church, whether you're here or in Senegal or in India, the believers, we bear all things. We are one body, one kingdom, right? So we are, his kingdom come, his will be done. We're these people group that we are in this already, but not yet. We're already in his kingdom, but not yet fully realized his kingdom until he comes back. This parousia of Christ, and we live with him in the new heaven and new earth. But right now, we are all unified as brethren. So we exist in this world, again, to repeat it again, but not of this world. The whole nature of this podcast, and it gets so frustrating when in our brothers and in our sisters, when something happens and we don't have the full context, we don't know what they're praying through. We don't know what they're going through. We don't know their story,
what
their
kind
situation.
of anxieties and struggles they might be.
Sure.
Like, even if you can't, if there's not like Paul talked about, without were fightings, within were fears. I just in my own personal life, I can tell you that the inward struggle is often more than the physical. Like the circumstances around you sometimes pale in comparison to the anxiety and just the chaos and the darkness. And man, don't ever discount the effectiveness the enemy can have on the mind of a leader, because I see it every day, and of course most people do who are on social media and tuned in. I mean, it's like every time you turn around, there's another pastor that's fallen. There's another, and it breaks my heart. But we want to then, like, again, oh, well, that's typical. And it's like, well, I mean, it's unfortunate, but there are casualties in this war, and it's a battle.
Sure. And one, like you said, this is a battle. This is a war. Like, there are spiritual forces, good versus evil, and not to get too spooky, or I'm not giving a ton of context right now, but this idea that there is a war over people that we can't see, this unseen realm. There is a war of people, right? And Satan is trying to play with our minds. He's trying to bring doubt and deceit and division. Right. And the division is what many believers play an active role in. And we bring in relatively no understanding. Like you said, sometimes we're going to have a bad day, not just like you and I, but just believers in general. We're going to have a bad day. And I mean, you can look at, so even like in Sullivan, right? We have this Sullivan chat, we have this St. Clair Unrestricted. We have these group chats out there on Facebook that is all about just breeding discord and deceit. They're all about just saying, hey, here's why I'm mad, here's why I'm frustrated. And there is never any context. In fact, one of my newest fears, one of my newest fears is driving and cutting somebody off which I don't. I'm an amazing driver. I'm the best driver
ending
ever,
up
actually.
on Sullivan
Yes,
Chat.
and then someone taking a photo of my truck and
That guy's a
saying,
pastor at the Ridge Church.
yeah, and he cut me off, and
Yeah.
I'm so mad, and you learn how to drive, and it's like, maybe I'm running to the hospital. You have no idea
Yeah.
what's going on, or maybe I just didn't see you. So where is and now this is like a silly example, but where is the understanding of saying, well, maybe something else is going on. Maybe he was just negligent and didn't look or didn't see me.
Yeah.
Or maybe he's rushing to the hospital because his wife's in the hospital. Or like, I have no context. Instead of believing believe in the best, I'm going to assume the worst. And I think that
Right.
that's a big frustration. And then I think, so going back to our topic, I think that when we embody the idea that we are sojourners, that we're exiles, that like you said earlier, we are not called to a certain camp, like Calvinism or Arminianism. We're not called to a certain camp of voting red or voting blue, as if Christ died for our political standing or
Right.
died for our racial background or died for our socioeconomic background. He didn't die for these things. He died so that we can be reconciled to the Father.
Right.
And as we are all on a journey, we all come from different walks and different spaces, giving understanding, not giving a green light to sin, not saying,
Right.
hey, if you're living in sin, you're fine, but giving understanding to the lost, to the hurting, and to the brethren. And it's so funny because we almost have like this timeline as well. It's almost like shifting gears a little bit. We have like this timeline of sanctification as well. So now someone's saved. Hey, you've been saved for 6 months or a year. It's time to stop cussing and stop smoking and start wearing a suit. And we throw out these arbitrary ideas of holiness, of sanctification that we have made up, that we said, hey, this is,
Right.
don't wear a hat in church. Don't do this, don't do that. And then we get in this weird spot of, we just remove understanding, we remove grace. So now we're believers that live in this world, that we are called to live as Christ lived, right? We're called to love the woman that's caught in adultery. We're called to love the woman that's had an abortion. We're called to love the man that's been evil to us. We're called to forgive our brothers and sisters for not being near to us. That's what we're called to. And then we live in this lack of understanding, lack of grace, and then at the same time looking out at the world and saying, why isn't the world a better place?
Mm-hmm.
Well, hold on now.
Or why does the world not want what we have?
Sure. Like imagine a church where we say, hey, I'm going to seek understanding when I'm frustrated.
Yep.
I'm going to seek clarity when there's confusion. I'm going to seek grace when there is a sin you've done against me.
Yeah.
And I'm going to choose to be merciful. Because I know whenever I mess up, when I have a bad day, when I'm not doing good, I want some mercy.
Right.
Like you catch me on a bad day, I want you to say, Pastor Matt, I need you to know that I'm not good right now.
Yep.
I'm going to need some understanding. Not saying there's not still a conversation need to be had after that, but
Right.
I'm going to need some understanding. And so if I want that.
Yeah. And let emotions settle and have a rational, objective conversation. It's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of, what Solomon said in Proverbs in reference to wisdom. Get wisdom, and with all you're getting, get understanding. Pursue understanding. That's one of the things that I find unique about the way the Lord handled people in his earthly ministry. Christ would preach oftentimes in parables, of course, and sometimes not give a real clear understanding, or rather a very clear explanation of what he meant by the parable. And then what you see happening is many times in the Gospels, Jesus would teach and preach and give illustrations through parables, and then he would sort of just slip off, like no big open, high pressure invitation, every head bowed, every eye closed. He didn't do that. What he would do was he would sort of just walk away from the crowd. And then what would we see happen? You see certain ones who really got locked in on the message and wanted to know more. They would follow him and say, Master, you said, whichever parable, we might want to reference, parable of the sower, for example. You said, the disciples did this often. You said this, who then can be saved? And so then he would take that and sort of expound on it further because they had a heart to understand. I way back in, I was still in college, and I heard a pastor say one time, and this stuck with me. Not many things do, but this one stuck with me. He said, teach the teachable and reach the reachable.
Mm.
And I thought, man, that's been so profound in my life, because not everybody has a heart that can be reached, because they continually just push truth away. Men love darkness rather than light. And when the light shines, they run and, run back to the shadows. And then some people, unfortunately, even Christians, just in some cases don't have a teachable spirit. They have such a hard head about their own predispositions and ideologies, and they just do not possess a hunger and thirst for truth. And so if as leaders, and I know this podcast isn't directed at leaders, but per se, but if as leaders we spend our time trying to chase them down and go after people that have no heart for understanding.
Sure.
They have no real hunger to know what you meant. I'm not going to chase you down and explain myself. If you have a question, and I practice this, but if you have a question, ask me. I'm not, again, I can only speak for our church culture, but in our church culture, I'm in the lobby every Sunday after both services. I'm here on Wednesday night, which is a much smaller crowd. We have Facebook, we have email, we have a website. I mean, there are ways. I'm not the most accessible guy, because I can't just throw my wife says my cell phone number is out there. If you Google it, I don't know. I hope it's not, but
I put it in Sullivan chat. So it's
thank
out there.
you, brother. I have to, like any well-managed person, you have to guard your time and where you invest your time and what's the most important thing. So, I have to do that. But at the same time, if somebody needs something, and it's not just me, we have a staff and we have a team of leaders. And I think that's probably true in most cases. And, you can get into this super mega church mentality where, the pastor is just like almost this mega star that you can't get to and you can't touch. And
growing up, our pastor had security guards, and you can never actually talk to him.
Really?
So like he would say goodbye to people at the door, but it was behind two security officers.
Wow.
He spoke over the shoulder.
He stood behind two.
Hey, goodbye, guys. Hey, goodbye, guys.
No, really?
I'm not even kidding.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Talk about inaccessible,
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a big mega church.
Yeah.
In St. Louis, and that's how they operated.
Well, and again, I don't pretend to understand everybody's context.
Sure.
But my guess would be that if it's a good church, I mean, again, let's not be delusional. Not all churches are good churches. But if it is a good church with sincere, godly leaders, then I don't see why you couldn't find a way. And we're kind of spending time talking about, church leaders, spiritual leaders, and congregants. But this is true for any Christian.
Even, as you're talking about this, I even have friends. Well, I had friends, I should say, that. Oh, I got it weird. Ow. But no, you have friends that I walk through life and they walk through life and they don't seek to ever understand. And they'll come with an accusatory spirit. And so for me, I'm like, I'm now at the stage of my life, because I'm 30, so, I'm old and wise.
Man, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. I have like three white hairs in my beard, so I'm...
Me as well.
A little more than three, But I have friends that, I say, you know what? If you're not trying to understand me at all, and I'm spending all of my energies chasing you down, all of my energies trying to explain myself, all my energies apologizing for things you misunderstood or you misinterpreted, maybe we're just not that close of friends.
Right.
Or maybe you're the type of person that I don't need to be that close with, because ultimately we have a mission. Like, as believers, we have a mission. So if I spend all of my time, like you're saying, I'm trying to reach the unreachable or teach the unteachable, while at the same time bypassing people around me that want to be reached,
absolutely,
that want to be taught, I want to focus on those people.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's almost like whenever Christ looks up and he says, look, the harvest is white. Like the harvest is ready. What are you going to do about it?
Right.
And I think even like this, again, this idea of sojourners, this idea of exiles, this idea of pointing fingers and throwing stones, all things we've covered so far, like if we can spend less time focusing on what Jimmy's doing down the road, or what Sally's doing down the road, and being convinced that Christ died for us to be reconciled to God. And he's given us a mission to love people well.
Given us the ministry of reconciliation,
Yes.
Paul said.
So we've been reconciled so we can preach that same ministry of reconciliation to other people. So like if we can focus on that a little more and less on, we talked about earlier about throwing up smoke screens, or I'm going to belittle this other person over here so I can feel better about my own insecurities. How about I just deal with my own insecurities?
Right.
Like maybe I can just deal with that because I know I have insecurities.
Jealousies, envy, like you can throw out a litany
Right.
of symptoms that we all probably possess in some way, shape, or form in our fallen nature.
Yeah.
But owning that and recognizing that is so liberating because I get jealous, I get envious, I get angry, I get frustrated, I get stressed, and a couple things I wanted to say in reference to that. And it's just stuff off the top of my head that we've been kind of thinking through and talking about recently. But I was telling you earlier about a pastor that's very dear to my heart that preached at a church, and apparently some of the people didn't like what he said. He was a guest speaker, and people didn't like what he said. And so the pastor of that church, feeling the pressure of it, I presume the pastor was out of town at the time, but he went back and listened to the sermon and like hyper scrutinized it, and basically kind of called this guy out. And by the way, mind you, this is a much older man. He's been in ministry. He's not been in, I'm 45 years old. He's not been in ministry as long as I've been alive, but close, right? And probably 40 years of ministry.
Wow.
Faithful ministry. Without scandal, without, you know what I'm saying? Like he's lived a clean life and been a good,
which is not highlighted enough.
godly man. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's not the most bombastic. He's not, you know what I'm saying? But he's just a very humble servant of God. Well, this young pastor that he preached for goes on a warpath and is tearing him apart. Well, incidentally, said pastor that preached the sermon at this church that they didn't like, preached here, and same sermon actually at our church. And, it frankly just was not my flavor. Like not something I would have preached on a Sunday. I was out of town. I think I was on vacation. But when I went back and listened to it, it was not something that I would have been, it wouldn't have been in my wheelhouse to preach that. And for him seemed a little out of pocket, frankly, for me. And, not to get into the comparison game, our church is much larger than the other church that he preached that at.
The guy that got offended.
Yeah. Our church is much larger, numerically. And I had a few people say, mostly people that are very close to me, said, "Hey man, did you listen to that? It's a little, a little different." And I acknowledged it. And I said, "Yeah, it was, but I know his heart, man. And he's a good guy, and I love him, and he's, I know he means well, and everybody has an off day, and and also we don't have to see eye to eye on everything." And I just think it's so, and it's like, and we've talked about this, like let's break this down to more like a friendship, kinship, fellowship type level. If someone came to me about a friend of mine, let's just use you for example, as I use the word friend loosely.
Wait, he's kidding, guys. Kidding. He loves me.
It's a joke. But let me use you. So if I know you well enough, we've known each other for about 8 years.
Yeah, about 8 years.
Yep. It was shortly after we moved to Sullivan. If someone came to me and said, "Hey, Stefan, he said this and this," and they start, rattling off whatever their beef was, whatever their problem with you is, I know you well enough that I could say, "Man, you know what? That doesn't sound like him, but let me talk to him. And, if it's an issue, maybe we should come together." This goes back to that ministry of reconciliation. Obviously, the most literal meaning of that is reconciling people to the Father. Sure. Well, but I'm saying in the context of the gospel, it's reconciliation is bringing, being the preaching the gospel, sharing the gospel. And, but it goes beyond that, because blessed are the peacemakers, for they should be called the children of God. So, so should that hypothetical scenario happen, I could say, man, I just don't, man, that doesn't sound like Stefan. Let me have a conversation with him if you want to be involved. I know your heart well enough and I also know you well enough. And frankly, anybody, this was kind of the second thing I was going to say, anybody that I'm close with, it's going to be because I know, number one, I can be my undiluted self. Anybody that's in my friend circle, and I think the older you get, the smaller that circle becomes, but anyone that's in my friend circle, I can be the most raw version of myself with them, number one. I don't need a close friend in my life that I feel like I have to try to impress or try to put on some air that's not reality. But number two, anybody in my close friend circle, I feel like we ought to be able to challenge each other. And if you are wrong, I think we should be able to call that out and say, hey man, why don't you, and we've done that.
Sure.
I don't know, man.
It's usually me correcting you, but yeah.
Well, right. Yeah. But none of us should be above that.
Sure.
Where we, and again, I mean, this gets weird and you have to give all these caveats and lead in qualifying statements. That also doesn't mean that we're constantly, policing each other. And, I think we get into this. I get weird on what we call accountability. Like I'm for accountability.
Sure.
Don't misunderstand that. I know you won't, but I'm talking to anybody who might hear this, but accountability is a good thing. And by the way, any leader who doesn't want accountability is dangerous because a good leader should welcome accountability.
Yes. That's a nugget of truth for everyone listening.
Yeah.
If your leader is rejecting accountability, I'm not saying find a new leader. I am saying you should push him with the eldership there and leaders there for him to find accountability.
Well, because that's
an active
just,
voice in that, because it's not only good for you as a congregant or the follower, but it's good for him and his soul. And we care about his heart and his soul and his family and his marriage, his kids. And without accountability, all of that's at risk. But keep going.
Right. But I also think within that same vein of thought that, sometimes we call being critical accountability. We kind of use that as hey man, I can't think of his name on TikTok, but there's this dude, man, he does these whole things where he kind of portrays that image of, hey man, I saw you at Applebee's the other day, man. And it looked like you were drinking like a daiquiri or something, brother. And I just want to approach you about that, man. If we're, like he just plays this whole thing out and sort of epitomizes that sort of church Kyle or whatever you want to call it. It's always in everybody's business under the guise of accountability. And that's silly. So it doesn't mean that we're called to police each other. But within your intimate circle of friends, what I would call confidants, a confidant should be, if they see something in you, like if I saw you doing something I really felt was unhealthy, then I should be able to approach you with that. However, I should also be willing and ready and open-minded to hear you give me your perspective on it as well.
And that's where this has been kind of our normal theme today, but that's where the understanding comes in.
Right.
Hey, I'm mad, or I don't agree, or I don't like this scenario that happened, or I heard this scenario, and then I give you the context. Oh, so that makes sense. So I'm not coming with ready to crucify you, or I call it like a character assassination.
Right.
I'm not coming to assassinate your character, right? I am coming seeking understanding first. And if my thought is correct, now I want to push that further and say, let's do better.
Right.
Right. But if I come and say, hey, Pastor Matt, you said this, or I think you said this, I think you did that, and you say, well, here's the context. So again, I have a gap of information. So I'm going to believe the best, not assume the worst, but even in believing the best, I'm still able to have a conversation. And I have that convo and say, I was wrong. Yeah. Sweet.
Well, and both parties have to be open. I love the word objectivity. Like both parties have to be objective. And it could be, again, just to continue this same scenario, it could be that I approach you and say, hey, bro, I heard, or you said, maybe I heard it firsthand. I heard you say something the other day, and man, that was kind of out of pocket, man. And I just, dude, I don't know, you really need to, and then you might say, well, I hear you, but let me give you some background. I could have walked up in the middle of something that had been going on for 25 minutes before I stepped into the room. and didn't have the full context. And so I also, as the person approaching you, need to be open-minded enough to hear your side. And as you're saying, not approach you with swords and torches ready to burn you. I need to be seeking clarity and understanding.
And the hard thing, I think, just real quick, people, we love drama, and we love when someone messes up.
Yeah.
Like you brought up the pastor that preached here, then preached at another church. You don't see many posts on Facebook of, hey, here's this man that's been a pastor for 45 years, no scandal, faithful, loves the Lord, teaches, blah, blah, blah. You don't see posts. You see posts the second that same man has a scandal, he hasn't. But if he did have a scandal, and he won't, but whatever, just get all those caveats.
Yeah.
If he did have a scandal, you'd see that all over Facebook because now there's drama. Now we went in on that. And I think you brought this up a little bit too about if I have a friend, right? If I have someone close to me, let's say the same scenario, someone comes and say, Pastor Matt said or did this, or I think he said or did this, and I lean in. Oh, that's crazy, man. Did he really say that? I never thought he would say. Are you serious? That is crazy. Well, I don't know if he said it, but that's if he did, that's wild, man. That's and so now I'm leaning in. I'm feeding into this.
You're almost willingly walking into a fictional narrative.
Yes.
Going,
and then I can, but if you listen to some people who are like skilled at being divisive, they'll leave those enough words out there to say, well, I said I didn't believe it, but I was just glued. I was like a car crash. I was like glued in. I couldn't stop watching it. And I was just, well, hold on. Like, where is the objectivity? Where's the trust? Where is the seeking understanding in that moment? Had this happened? Well, hold on. I hear you. And that's not, if that happened, I understand why you'd be upset. But why don't we have a conversation?
Right.
Why don't we figure out what's going on? And maybe there is, again, now we come to this conversation, and maybe there is, you know what, I did say that, and I need to be humble to receive that. And now there needs to be correction or whatever the fault is after that. But I'm first coming with understanding, and I'm not leaning into gossip. I'm not leaning in. And that's where this idea, again, of sojourning, of being an exile, of being in the world, not of the world. The world loves gossip.
Yeah, right.
We love feeding into all negativity and frustrations and dissensions. We love that as people. Look at reality TV. All reality TV is just drama and division and whatever. And so for us as believers saying, hey, I can be here in a world that loves gossip, in a world that loves division, in a world that loves dissension, but I'm not feeding into that.
Let me use a worldly example of this. Van Halen, right? I know this sounds like I'm coming way out of left field, but
I'm like, who's that again?
Shut up. But Van Halen, okay. The whole David Lee Roth scandal in the early 80s, and then they had Sammy Hagar. It's wild because I've been a fan of Van Halen since I was a little kid. But people still talk about that. Like it's their favorite that you bring up Van Halen, and people divide over, well, it was the real Van Halen when it was David Lee Roth, and it was, or the other way, it was Sammy Hagar. And it's just nuts, but and I know you can't relate to this.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for bringing it up.
No, I trust you. I'm seeking understanding right now.
I see this stuff pop up, and I just had this thought the other day. I was like, people are still talking about a controversy from like 40 years ago. And a band that is like one of the top, largest, like most widely listened to gold, platinum, double platinum, whatever, rock bands in history. What people still love to talk about is the division, which honestly, again, you look at these prima donnas in the music industry, there's plenty of drama to go around, but it just serves the purpose of this point of that. I mean, you can do 1,000 things right, and the second you misstep or misspeak, I've had this happen to me. Preachers have off days, and you say one thing a little bit out of pocket or a little bit in anger or in the flesh. That's what people are going to grab onto, and so we need to be guarded. I mean, we have to do our part too and be prayerful and try to make sure we're walking in the Spirit and speaking in wisdom and all those things, but. Dadgummit, nobody's going to do that 1,000% all the time. Nobody.
And you don't. Like just whoever the listener, you're not doing that. So don't come at people with that same measuring stick.
Right.
Like judge not lest you too be judged. And so if you're going to judge me on this same standard, I'm going to judge every word you say.
Yes.
Like you don't want that. So we had this conversation earlier this week about, hey, if you come at me with a certain kind of judgment, then I am allowed now to have the same measuring stick with you, and you may not want that. And so it's not like a threat or whatever, but it's just the reality of if you
it's
know
just though.
Yes, you don't want this, then don't give it to somebody else. Don't come out this judgment. And I struggle with that sometimes. I struggle with that, like a critical spirit. I can get in there, my insecurities flare up. I start getting critical, and it's like, well, hold on, like I would not want this for me. I would hope you understand. You would seek understanding. So
sometimes I give grace out of selfishness.
Hey, I'm going to store up some of this over here in the account
because I know there's going to be a day that I need grace.
Sure.
And I hope that I've sown enough grace to reap some on my off days. You know,
I'm gonna start doing that in my marriage. I'm gonna say, hey, babe, I'm gonna let this go. I love you. I'm gonna serve you so well now. You remember that time when I served you?
Yeah. Maybe
no,
don't
that's
do that.
good.
But I mean, that is, again, and obviously not that we do it out of selfishness, but just understanding we're all human. We're all, just giving people grace. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean there aren't times. We're as the body of Christ, we're on this journey together. Mm-hmm. We're going to spend eternity together in heaven. And we need to be giving the grace that we've received. Mm-hmm. That's the essence of Christianity. Mm-hmm. It's you've been given grace, so now give grace.
Sure. And as you do that, just for us as an institution, as a church, the Ridge Church of Sullivan, when we do that, then people will judge us for loving people too much or too well. Right. Why
or, they won't call it that. Well, you're liberal, you're a compromiser,
sure, they'll throw out these words and try to pigeonhole you in a little box or whatever because they feel more justified throwing up a smoke screen.
Yep.
We just want to love people well. And I think that the important part of this, like this entire podcast, ultimately, but especially right now in this conversation, is we want to love people well, especially those who are down and out, because we have been down and out and we've needed his love well. Mm-hmm. Like we've all, you and I and our staff and people like our volunteers have walked through hard things in life. Yep. That have walked through, desperation. For me, I've walked through desperation, suicidal thoughts and almost action. Until my wife saved me off a rooftop, literally 5 stories on a rooftop, and she literally pulled me off of the roof. And so because I've had this sweet love that God's given me, I want to give it to other people. I want to give understanding. I want to give grace. And I have a gap of information, and I want to believe the best.
Yeah.
Because the gospel, that's a gospel. It's not a gospel issue, but that's the gospel lived out through us.
It's the heart of the gospel, though.
Sure. And I think for sojourners, it's hard because we live in the world. So again, just wrapping all this up a little bit, and I'm going to see if you have any final thoughts, but, as we wrap this whole idea up of, hey, they're in right now in our world, right? It is hot on our social media.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on left and right. And we brought up earlier today that elections are coming up soon, and as we get up for that, it'll be a left and right. It'll be a black and white.
Pastors are going to come under fire then too.
Yeah. It'll be a saved, unsaved.
Yeah.
And the world needs sojourners, needs the exiles that say, hey, we live here and we are passionate about things that are right and just. I'm not saying don't have a voice. That's not what we're saying. We're passionate about these things. Our number one focus is reaching the reachable and teaching the teachable, because the gospel matters most.
Yeah.
So I'll give you final thoughts, and then you.
Well, it's not so much a final thought, but a question I want to throw out there. You talked about loving the down and outer. What I struggle with is, and I'm again making up terms here, but I struggle with loving the up and outer. The legalist that doesn't see their own flaws, the person that they've built a very good facade, and some people are better at it than others. It's always a facade, but some people are very good at pretending that they have it all together. And in fairness, some people do have it together better than others. But when Jesus said, "They that are whole need not a physician, but they that are sick," I struggle, and my friend John and I have talked about this too, but I struggle with loving the Nicodemus, with having compassion toward the horde that wants to arrest the woman in adultery and throw her at the feet of, that wants to stone those that they deem unworthy of grace. Those are the people that are difficult for me to have compassion toward. Is that fair because again, we mentioned with what judgment
Sure.
you use, you're going to be judged by that same standard. So is it fair for us who have maybe, again, I can only speak for myself, but I've gone through the school of hard knocks of being in a legalistic denomination. I come out of the independent fundamental Baptist movement, and I do clearly say come out of it, but because I'm not in it anymore, haven't been in a long time, but coming out of that, is it fair to struggle? Not to love them, but to have compassion toward them? Or maybe why is it so difficult?
Yeah, fairness is a hard question. I think that why is it hard, I imagine, is because you can see that they've been saved. So let's use the example of a church person that goes to a church that is judging the down and outer. They're the up and outer.
Up and outer. We're all out.
Yeah,
Without Christ, we're all
Right.
out.
Yeah, so someone that's tasted, it's hard. So it's hard for me as well. So I have a similar struggle. Whenever I see someone that has tasted the grace of God, that has received His grace, received His mercy, received His love, and then that person refuses to love the other person, I sit back and Christ has a story about this.
Yeah.
The debtor.
Yeah.
This one man has 10,000. Don't look it
50,
up.
50, one owed 50, one owed 500.
Yeah, and he's like, so this guy comes in and says, man, I owe so much money. And the master says, hey, I forgive you. Your debt's been paid. And then he leaves and he goes to his buddy. He had like 10,000 days wages, whatever it was. And he's like, master, forgive me. He says, hey, I forgive you. Your slate is clean. Go in peace. So this same man has been forgiven for so much, finds a man that owes him a month's wage. And he grabs him by his collar. He says, pay me right now. And the man says, well, I don't have the money. And he gets irate and throws him in jail. So my mind is, well, how you've just been forgiven all of this debt that you've owed, and then you look at this man that owes very little in comparison, and you don't forgive him. How is your mind so deluded? How are you so convinced that you're better than him?
Right.
And that's really what it boils down to. These hyper-religious people is that's the heart. You've been forgiven from death. Ephesians 2 says what? We were enemies of God.
Right.
Children of wrath like the rest of mankind. But God, which is one of the greatest verses in all time. But God, who is rich in mercy. Come on now.
Yep.
So this God saved you. While you were an enemy, you were dead, desolate, evil, damned, all the harsh words out there. And then he said, hey, I'm choosing you.
Yep.
I'm reconciling you to the Father. I'm bringing you back home.
Frankly, just forgiving the whole debt.
Yes. And not because you brought anything to salvation except your own sin.
Yeah.
Except your own brokenness. You know what I'm saying?
But now I'm going to go out and judge with a greater harshness.
Yes. Now this person then leaves who are forgiven of all these things, and you turn around and you're like, yeah, well, you looked at me wrong, so now I'm mad, or you're doing this, or you're doing that. And I think the Bible even talks about that. I don't know the verse, and maybe we can put it in the show notes later on if we even have show notes. I don't know. I'm making that up.
It's episode 1, man.
It's episode 1, so maybe we will. I don't know. Stephen will do it, but that idea that person who's been forgiven much loves much.
Yeah.
And he who's been forgiven little loves little. So I would say for that person who's living in that, religious state, maybe you have not fully reconciled how much God's forgiven you.
Right.
But it's hard for us on our end of people that have, and my story is not like, as quote unquote as harsh or whatever as some people's story, but when I became saved, I fell in love with the idea that my Father in heaven's never going to leave me or forsake me. I fell in love with that. And I was not a nice person. And so I can't shake that mentality that, what grace?
Yeah.
What grace? That question, I know when my wife and I were missionaries in Africa, our pastor and our friend Leo, this is a young man we trained up to be a pastor. He's not young, he's older than me, but we trained him up. And one phrase he would always say is, "Quelle grâce," or what grace? He would sit there, we were doing Bible study, he and Leo and I, we were doing Bible study in Africa, and we're studying Hebrews. Out of nowhere, we're Hebrews 1, the deity of Christ. We're going over this a little bit, and at a mid phrase, I'm talking, it cuts me off. He looks at me almost misty eyed. I won't cry because that'd be weird. But he looks at me, be cool, Is my nose, my nostrils flaring, But he looks at me like this misty eyed. Again, not even talking about God's grace. And he looks at me and he's like, what grace? what grace. What grace. I'm like,
Mm.
and I think if as exiles, as sojourners, as people that have been redeemed by Christ, if we don't have that same heart of, man, what grace. Like,
Yeah.
I was nothing. And even the person that was raised by, doctors and have had good money and have never struggled in their sense of monetarily or physical things. And let's say they were always good at sports or good at education, that they feel like, their life was never difficult. And you're now saved, man, what grace.
Right.
Don't think because you don't, like, I hate people say, I don't have a testimony. Man, if God's redeemed you,
You do.
that's a testimony.
Right.
Because you were dead. Ephesians 2. If you don't
Mhm.
believe me, read Ephesians 2, 1-6, regardless of your background. So to answer your question, I think those people, they have not meditated on the idea of, man, what grace. What grace have you loved me?
I would say they've either not experienced the grace of God
Sure.
in a real cellular heart level way, or they have and just have forgotten
Sure. Yeah, maybe.
where they've come from. I think it's important, not that we never want to dwell in the past, but we also need to visit our scars sometimes and say, man, I remember who I was. I remember where I was, and I can imagine where I'd be without the grace of God in my life. And I really believe if we live with that genuine mindset, not pretentiously, but with that genuine mindset that just as Paul said in 1 Corinthians 15, and I think this is, here's a great place to kind of wrap this up and summarize. Paul said in 1 Corinthians 15, I am what I am by the grace of God, and his grace, which was bestowed upon me, was not in vain, because I labored more abundantly.
Amen.
And so what Paul is saying, now my nostrils are starting to flare. But I think if I could sort of recapitulate what Paul was saying is, I've been given so much grace, but I haven't used grace as I haven't been a receptacle of grace. I've reciprocated the love back toward the Father by giving love and grace to others around me. Man, how different would our world look if God's people, not minding in this moment those who are outside of the faith, but just the people in this world that God has redeemed, purchased with the blood of Christ, if we would start living with that mindset and treating people with that same attitude of grace, how different would our churches look, man? How different would our communities look? I mean, in America, there are churches on every corner, it would seem. And but what impact are those churches actually making? We're not making an impact by picketing. We're not making an impact by protesting. And again, I'm not ever saying there's no place for these things,
Sure.
right? Like, but that's not really what makes a difference. Christ is the one who has to change the person's heart. And in most cases, people's hearts do not change because or as a result of Christians being harsh or mean-spirited to them.
I don't personally know a single believer. I've done ministry here in India, in Africa. I've never met someone who's been saved by the harshness of a believer, ever.
No.
It's always by the love of the Father, and they've been drawn in by, that's been shown out from other believers that have loved them. For me. Now, maybe there's people out there that when they got screamed at in front of Walmart, they got saved. I don't know, but just not in my experience have I ever seen that.
Well, mine either. I've seen some quote unquote professions, and I don't mean to say that sarcastically, but anyway, that's probably another subject for another time. But yeah, I want to say this to. Do we want to wrap this up at this point?
Yeah, we wrap it up. I don't know how long we've been talking.
I don't know how long we've been talking either. In closing, to our church family who may be tuning in, what you can expect in the future if you become a listener of this podcast is, we'll kind of give some addendums perhaps in the future to sermon series. We might talk about extra things that maybe I didn't have time to get into on Sunday or Wednesday, whichever one we happen to be discussing at that particular time. So this will be the spot where you maybe get some of that extra stuff. Like I kind of said with Jesus teaching and the disciples followed. This is where you kind of get more of that explanation, I think.
And if you follow the ridge, there's many times your Pastor Matt runs out of time.
Yes. I mean,
so you guys know that. So this is a space where you can
this is where I get to finish my sermon.
What was it? Someone talked about today. Whenever you do that, it's like when you're at a restaurant and someone walks by the whole plate of food. And you think it's your food, and then they keep walking past you. Right. It's like that. So this is where we get to get the rest of that content.
I often don't. Like last night, I hated where I cut off last night. It killed me. But I was also looking at the time and how much content I still had. Anyway, I'll figure out how to deal with that later. But and then you'll just hear additional stuff. We're going to talk about, we'll talk about current events at different times, I'm sure. Just a much more laid back conversational, setting, and we'll probably bring different guests in and give you different angles, maybe on parts of our church or other aspects of the ministry. But it'll be good, man. I'm excited about it, and I think could be a very helpful, much needed discipleship tool, and just a helpful tool for any Christian wherever they're at in their journey as an exile,
and the unbelievers, hopefully as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That final thought that I had, then you can close it out however you want to do that, but. The goal for us as believers, as exiles, that we can have understanding and give grace to people. Because of what grace that we have received, and why can we not give the grace to other people? That's our heart cry. Yeah. That's our challenge for the first episode. I think it's a good spot as well to this is the heartbeat of what the exiles are. We are people that have been called out of this world to love radically, to be different, to reconcile people back to the Father. And so, we're going to do that through, like you said, expounding other sermons and current events at times, and encouraging the brethren, challenging the brethren, hopefully, and letting the person know that's listening right now, if you're not saved, just real quick, if you're not saved, man, there's a God that loves you and cares for you. And there's churches, our church is one of them, and there are others around the globe that care about you and want to see you know Christ. Yeah.
And I'm glad you said that, because throughout church history, the church has gone through different measures or types of reform, and I'm convinced that the reform that the American church needs right now is to be reformed in the grace of God. Is that we get back to actually living out the grace of God, not our talking points, not our theological soapboxes, and I love theology. It's a passion of mine. I'm very passionate about theology, passionate about eschatology, passionate about, you name it. I love the Bible. It's what I do for fun. It's what I do in ministry and my life is dig into the scriptures. But we need to learn to love those who are outside the faith, those who maybe have been hurt by churches. Again, not unpacking my story here today, but I walked away from the church because of the way I literally remember saying in my heart, if not audibly, to the Lord, if this is what Christianity is, I don't want it. Not that I was rejecting Christ. I wasn't renouncing my faith and walking away. I wasn't an apostate in that sense. I just didn't want to have anything to do if how I saw Christians treating other people, if that's what Christianity was, and I know now that it's not, but I've been there, and I've had that thought, and I've felt that way very deeply in my heart. Anyway, but Christ is real. His love is unreal as far as just from our human minds trying to understand it. But it's the love of God that changes people. It's amazing to me what love can do. Loving your family, loving your community, loving your church. It's amazing what the love of God can do. And so that's what we're about. We'll talk about a lot of other things, but that's essentially what we're about. And have some very deep-rooted biblical convictions. Yeah. And would love to discuss some of those things in the future, but ultimately everything is about Christ and loving well. So amen. Thanks for listening. If you're tuning in, you survived the pilot episode. It only gets better.
Pilot episode.
Hey.
It only goes up from here, guys.
That's why I never watched The Office. Everybody was so all my friends 20 years ago. It's been that long? 20 years. Yeah, dude. Yeah. Yeah. It's because I watched the pilot episode and I was like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life.
That first episode is the best episode, actually.
Oh.
Episode 1. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you guys next time.
Yep. God bless you. We are Exiles.